Welcome to the Hidden Corners, where truth and terror collide. Discover a realm where the lines between the living and the supernatural blur, as you embark on a journey to the paranormal and visit the mysterious hidden corners of your mind. Good evening. Tonight we're going to try something a little new. I'm going to read a story by one of our listeners, and Cameron Buckner is going to read a story by a listener as well. Our topic tonight is UFOs. So join us. I hope you'll enjoy these stories.
In the year 2000, I saw something really strange around my house. We live out in the country, about 2 miles from the Tennessee River. I had 2 babies at the time, as well as having insomnia, so sleep was a pretty foreign concept to me. The best I can recall, it was around midnight. I was laying in bed reading a book. We lived on a back road and we didn't hear much traffic at that time of night. So when I began to hear something that sounded like an 18-wheeler diesel coming up the road, it was unusual. Well, I laid there and I listened, and it kept getting louder, like it was coming closer. So I jumped out of bed wanting to see what it was, and I went to the front door and opened it, and I was astonished by what I saw. It wasn't an 18-wheeler. It was in the sky just to the right of our house. It had a blimp-like shape with lights running up and down it, and a row on top and a row on the bottom. It was loud, like a big diesel motor running, and it was moving very slow from south to north in the eastern sky from my house. When it got in front of my house, directly across from where I was standing there gaping, it kind of stopped, and then in the next instant, it was gone. There was no more noise, nothing. It was just gone. It happened so quick that I didn't have time to wake up my husband, so I was the only one who saw it. I don't know what it was, but it was the strangest thing I've ever seen.
I live in the small town of Paonia, nestled deep in the heart of peach orchard country in Colorado. Life has always been peaceful and uneventful, and we like it that way. We go about our daily routines. Everyone knows everyone else's business in this little town. Neighbors greet each other with smiles, and every trip to the grocery store takes at least an hour longer than intended because of all the people you know that want to stop and talk. As idyllic as our little community is, there was one summer evening back in 1965 when everything went a little off-kilter. It was a cloudless night. The crickets and cicadas were singing, and the stars shimmered brightly overhead. It was the kind of night that the kids run around the streets, playing hide-and-seek and tag, while the parents sit in lawn chairs drinking cocktails and talking about life. You didn't worry about your kids being out after dark. The only crime our little community saw was high school kids that would climb the trees in the orchards and throw peaches or apples at passing cars. As the evening progressed, families started turning in for the night when a silent hush fell over the town. All the crickets stopped chirping, the night swallows were silent, and not a sound could be heard other than the kids as they played in the streets. It was just odd. It felt as it does right before a storm when everything quiets and the animals start seeking shelter. The silence before the storm, we call it. But there was no storm predicted, no clouds to signal bad weather on the horizon, nothing of the sort. As heads turned skyward, everyone gasped. A few people ran to grab their neighbors who had gone inside, whispering to come out now and see this thing. Others stood frozen, unable to move, disbelieving what they were seeing. There, amidst the twinkling stars, was a giant gleaming silver object gliding silently across the treetops. Gasps and whispers spread through the crowds of neighbors that were now gathered in the street or out on their lawns, gazing skyward. Everyone strained to catch a glimpse of this mysterious craft. The children stopped playing and ran to their parents, pointing excitedly to the sky, their eyes wide with wonder, while adults exchanged concerned and even scared glances at each other. The strange object in the sky just lingered there, slightly moving. A couple of the guys ran inside to get their guns, just in case they would need them, but the majority of us just stood there, mouths gaping open in awe. It was enormous, a huge, round, saucer-shaped disk with an iridescent silver glimmer to it. The bottom, which we could see fairly clearly, appeared smooth. And then, just as quickly as it arrived, it was gone. As it darted away, you could see that the edge of the saucer had long rectangular slits, which light came out of. It was not possible to see the top of the craft, and it moved so quickly that I really couldn't say if it had windows or a domed top like you see in the movies. It was just a smooth disk in the sky, and so large that I estimate it probably would have been the size of at least a city block. News of the sighting quickly spread beyond our little neighborhood, and soon everyone was talking about it. Some of us had seen the entire disk. Others had just seen it streaking across the sky as it left. In the weeks that followed, scientists, UFO researchers, and conspiracy theorists flocked to our little town, hoping to catch a glimpse of the extraterrestrial nocturnal visitor. It was a media circus, but we didn't see it again. And now, years later, we are left with only our fading memories of that extraordinary summer evening. The Alien Visitor. In the summer of 1994, my husband and I bought a brand new home in one of the many housing subdivisions being built in the Sacramento Valley during the 1990s housing boom. The area had originally been mostly farmland and floodplains. There were dozens of subdivisions being built, and each subdivision displayed beautifully decorated home plans. The homes were much more affordable then, so we applied for a first-time buyer loan and crossed our fingers. The loan process seemed to take forever, but when we were approved, we got to pick out our very own flooring style and upgraded the kitchen appliances, which was so nice since the apartment we had lived in had no dishwasher or self-cleaning oven. We moved our family, which consisted of the two of us, our 4-year-old son, and our future baby girl, who was due in mid-August. We were so happy to have accomplished so much in a relatively short amount of time. The house was on a dead-end street, since the owner of the property behind the subdivision did not want to sell any of his property, which would have allowed for the street to go through and join up with other subdivisions. There was still a lot of open land and homes in various stages of construction. Our neighbors all had kids about the same age as ours. So our son made new friends, and all the kids played on the street, since there was no traffic during the day while most people were at work. Unfortunately, my husband was not able to find a job in Sacramento right away, so he would stay with his mom back in the Bay Area during the work week. Then he would drive back to the valley so we could do our grocery shopping and other errands. At that time, we only had one car, and I was left stranded until he was back from the Bay Area. It was a long commute, but my husband was so happy to buy us the house. He was willing to commute with the hope that he would find a job in the valley soon enough and stop commuting. It was a whole year before he was hired at one of the local auto body shops. When our daughter was born, my husband was able to take a week off from work to be with us and enjoy our new baby girl. He then went back to work to his commute. He would get up at 3 a.m., make his coffee, get his overnight bag, and leave around 3:30 a.m. so he could be at work by 6:30 a.m. Back then, he was the breadwinner, so we really needed him to keep that job, even if it was 100 miles away. I would normally get up with him and spend a few minutes with him before he would be off to his commute. I would go back to bed and try to sleep before the baby would wake up to nurse around 5:30 a.m. I would nurse her in bed, then lay her between me and our 4-year-old son, and the three of us would snuggle and sleep until around 8 or 8:30 before we started our day. We were so spoiled. On this Monday, after he left for his commute, I felt uneasy. I felt scared, but I didn't know why. I decided to go back to our bedroom and lay down, thinking that the baby would be up soon enough to nurse, so maybe it would be better to just lay back down. I fell asleep and had a horrible nightmare. I dreamt our son was missing, and we were running to different streets looking for him, calling his name. I woke up suddenly, and I was so relieved that it was just a horrible dream, and my boy was fast asleep next to me, and the baby still in her bassinet next to my bed. I turned over on my side facing the bassinet and saw a bright light coming in between the window blinds, and thinking out loud, I said, "Is it morning already?" The light was coming in between the blinds, and it was so bright, but the rest of the room looked dark. There was a bright light on the wall next to the window. The baby bassinet was between the window and our bed. I looked up to see where that light was coming from, and to my horror, just above the bassinet was a gray's face. It was just the head, no upper body, legs, or arms. The head was a dark gray in color, very round, ending in a pointed chin, small slits for mouth and nostrils, but the eyes were large, almond-shaped and very, very shiny black, and it had some sort of glass lamp on top of its head. The light on the wall was coming from this lamp. The being was looking down at the baby in the bassinet. Oh my gosh! I couldn't speak. My heart started pounding so hard, and I had started trembling uncontrollably. It saw me, and it scowled at me when it realized I was looking at it. It moved toward me, and I started screaming, swinging my arms and kicking. It was just there in the room, above my baby's bassinet, in the house. It floated from its original position above the bassinet to just above my face. I remember seeing this light blue fog build up in front of my face. Then, in a dreamlike state, I remember a sound like pigeons make, that cooing sound. I remember feeling that whoever was talking to me was stern and was telling me that it was for our own good. And then I woke up again. When I woke up again, it was still dark out. It was around 6 a.m., but the blankets were perfectly made around the bed, like nothing had happened, and everything felt very still. My son was asleep next to me, and the baby was in her bassinet. I got out of bed and turned all the lights on in the room and the rest of the house. I checked all the rooms in the house. I checked the locks on the front door, the lock in the backyard sliding glass door. Everything was just like I had left it after my husband had left for work. I decided to just stay up and just start my day. In fact, I got in the shower, even though that was not my usual time to shower. When I was washing my hair, there was a sore spot on the top of my head. No blood, no bump, just very, very sore. I got dressed and went to the kitchen and had some coffee. While having my coffee, I was trying to make sense of all those events. I remembered the nightmare I had woken up from, and how relieved I had been that it had just been a bad dream. But then, that thing was there. I couldn't decide if it had been another bad dream, or if that second part was real. It just didn't make sense. I called my sister and told her about my weird dream, and started crying because it seemed like it had been real, but I kept thinking that it couldn't be real. As the day progressed, I became very anxious, and before it was evening, I called my sister asking if she could come over and pick us up. I did not want to be there alone with the kids when it was night again. She came over and took us to her apartment. My sister wasn't sure what to make of the dream. I was just grateful that I didn't have to be alone in the house. We stayed in her kids' room that night. I remember feeling so scared because I didn't know if it would happen again. I put both kids and me under the twin bed we were supposed to sleep on, but we slept under the bed. I called my husband and told him about my bad dream, but he thought it was just stress from being left alone so many nights taking care of the kids and the house. My husband picked us up from my sister's place and drove us back to our house. That evening, I tried to go about my normal routine, making dinner, bathing the kids before bed, and watched a movie. When it was time for me and my husband to go to bed, I put both kids in the bed between us. I was terrified that it would come back, that I would wake up and that face would be there looking at me when I opened my eyes. I knew there was nothing I could do to protect us, and that made me more frightened than anything. My husband continued to commute for another 6 months, so I was still alone in the evenings. That was the worst part. For weeks, every night I would stay up just until I could see daylight before I would feel safe to fall asleep. I would leave the TV on and the bedroom lights on and fight sleep until I would see the early sunlight peek in through the windows. I didn't feel safe until around early spring when the morning light starts just a bit earlier each morning. I went on like this for about 3 years, every winter. For years I was terrified to look out any window in the evenings. I would close all the blinds in the house at night and leave some lights on before going to bed. My husband would just tell me that it had just been a bad dream. And after a few months, he didn't like me to talk about it. I no longer fear the winter nights, but I know it wasn't a dream. Regarding the description of the creature I saw, in the book titled Operation Trojan Horse by J.A. Keel, there is a description of an ET that has been described wearing some type of light attached to or on top of its head. Wow, well, that was a very interesting story. Thank you for sending it in. And if any of you have stories about UFOs you've seen or alien creatures, well, send them in to us, and we will read them on our channel. So, thank you for listening. Good night.